Hey, how's it going, everybody? I know it's been a while. Last recorded back in April, but yeah, it's 2023 wraps up. Figured I'd revive the pod. So welcome back, everyone, to the Mo Love Podcast, Honest Conversations with Mo. And obviously, I guess we'll get right into it. And I guess start off with lessons learned throughout this year and what I've learned about myself, what I've learned about the world. I'll definitely say 2023 was definitely a year of self analysis. I know I was discussed, doing that internal work, but I think this year really presented that in the sense of whether it was, professionally, as far as my work and constantly on the go, to personally, how am I analyzing myself in the sense of, you know, doing that deep work of really figuring out, what does confidence look like? What does, being the best version of myself, really look like? And that'll be, something I like to dive into this episode as far as, that take on self awareness versus self confidence. And we'll get into that in a little minute. But as far as kind of what that best version of myself looks like from the lessons learned this year is knowing that, when I set my mind to it, as stubborn as I can be, I know what I'm really capable of, and I think that this year really taught me that and made me really aware of that in a sense of just being understanding of my capabilities, understanding of my talents, and really having to tap into it as well. And I think that's probably a challenge as well. And that's something that I learned where I think I labeled it in terms of similar to the inconsistent play of Anthony Davis at times. Although this year we'll get into it. Uh, this current NBA season, he is cooking. That boy AD is cooking. But yeah, just I was to compare that in the sense of I felt inconsistent at times. And I was consistently inconsistent. I would say so. Just being more consistent and being consistent because you know when I think when you see the things you're capable of, and maybe life happens. Obviously, you get kind of caught up into a lull or into a rut, but understanding, getting back and, refocusing. And I think that's the most important thing, I've learned throughout this year was just, refocusing. I think maybe out of any year doing a great job of, giving myself breaks and, being honest when, I did feel that burnout. When I did feel like maybe I was overextending myself, maybe I was overvaluing people's opinions, a bit too much. And I think really being aware of that and accepting that, you know, where I know at times when I did, overvalue people's opinions and think realizing where it stemmed from, and how to move forward beyond that as an individual. And then in the sense of self awareness, and knowing yourself and being, aware of not only your flaws, but obviously also your strengths and how you can strengthen those, understanding your insecurities, and just really, being that, better version of the self, as we, continue to, you know, become better versions of ourselves. And, as I think I spoke on the IST tournament. How my Lakers. We were the champs, but we've struggled since then in the sense of maybe our self awareness as a team of how uh, maybe we have to. We I think we spoke on earlier this season. Darvin Ham had touched on. I guess it was the top of the season, all the different lineup combinations that the Lakers have available. Well, it's just I think having that confidence to go out there and put those lineups out there, bigger lineups. I think, Gilbert Arenas always mentions it on his podcast in terms of uh, bigger lineups. The bigger lineups have always, won championships. And, so, it's been true. And the Lakers, won in 2020 because they had a bigger lineup. You had JaVale McGee, you had Dwight Howard, AD, which Morris twin was it? I can't remember the Morris twin. Markeith Morris, because I remember it from the championship ring celebration when his daughter had said that. Yeah, Markeith. Yeah, that was just such a big Lakers team. And yeah, I think we have good size. I think it's about having the confidence to use the size. Like you have Vando, and I get it. Maybe the hesitation on Vando in terms of his shooting, but you've seen he's worked on it this off season. So I think it's trusting him to let him take those shots. We obviously don't want him to take a bunch of shots like Torian Prince has taken. D'Lo not shooting enough and giving guys also like Cam Reddish, who I love Cam Reddish's defensive ability, but he's been hitting his corner threes. But I need Cam to clean up those hands, man. He's been fumbling a lot of balls that led to turnovers. Uh, so yeah, just gotta work on that. And I know that was a crazy transition into kind of that topic of self confidence. Um, yeah, I think we have to kind of be aware of, when we have that self awareness about ourselves, is having that confidence and that willingness to, you know, be able to, evolve that version of ourselves, and growing in all aspects. And just in terms of figuring out what that growth looks like, as I've continued to, figure out throughout this year. As I mentioned, being on the go a lot this year. Just, uh, you know, building that confidence, you know, in your craft, and, understanding, the places it, can potentially take you. And I think it's having that belief in your skill sets, and, working towards it, getting better, finding ways to get better, finding ways to engage more. And yeah, this year, I guess wasn't, kind of, when you're going into a situation, and you're like, whoa. And I was like, yeah, um, kind of, in my role as I continue to, build confidence and, what we do and, in our programs, overall, within the industry, just understanding, what leadership looks like, understanding, not being acceptable, not knowing and asking those questions, you know. shows great leadership, and I think continue to grow in those areas. As a professional, as an individual, in my own personal life, and I guess because I guess I'll be honest. I just, I call honest conversation with Mo. I incorporate a little sports in here and there. Um, I guess this is also going to be, kind of a half basketball podcast, anyways, in a sense, because I love the game of basketball. So I guess I'm gonna just jump back into it with, my Lakers. So yeah, yeah, like Rui, you know, I understand, the facial fracture, he's got the mask on, looking like, hooping out there. I think Rui just needs more minutes. I think Rui should be in the starting lineup, honestly. I believe Rui should be in the starting lineup. Makes the lineup bigger, as we touched on earlier. It adds more offense, and I think pairing Rui with Fando helps out Torian with Reddish off the bench. AR, I think, should start over D'Lo. D'Lo had a tough December for sure, especially over the last 8 games. Had 17 last night, but yeah, I think D'Lo. I mean, obviously, I think he should come off the bench, and get your ice back in, get that ice back in your veins, man, and continue, lead that second unit, and then hey, you come back in, and uh, yeah, then we go from there, man. You know, you come back into the starting lineup. Maybe we'll see how it goes, the chemistry in that regard. But I think D'Lo should be the one that's leading the second unit, not AR. I think we need AR scoring punch. AR is kind of that early energy because I think D'Lo plays with that energy. But I think you kind of see it on how D'Lo is on the court. You know, it's like he has it, and then it's just like sometimes he's just out of it, especially when the shots are falling. I get it, when the shots are falling, the shots aren't falling, and I get it. You kind of lose that confidence, but kind of being more active on the floor. And I want to say this because I see it so many times, and I see of course all across the league, and uh we're watching the games and guys are just standing in the corner. It's like, yo, cut to the basket, dog. And I'm like, yo, especially if the defender is looking forward, got his back turned. Just cut. Just cut, man. Guys just be standing in the corner, no ball movement, no off ball movement. And I'm just like, bro, if y'all just cut easy points. And I don't get it. I don't know if this is the offense and guys are just being told, hey, stand in the corner, just see what happens. I don't know. I'm not in the locker room. I don't know these guys. I don't know what goes on, of course, in the game plan and everything. But when I'm seeing it on during the game and I see guys just standing in the corner and guys can get easy baskets with LeBron's vision, D'Lo's vision, shoot. AR's vision at times. AR does have solid vision, but just guys, like guys just cut to the basket, and oftentimes I do see it, be that leads to a late read and everything. But yeah, I guess I'll get off my basketball tangent for a bit, and I guess in terms of the ISC tournament, when watching the Lakers, struggle since then. And It was a big success, of course, for the NBA. I think, mimicking and emulating what the I was about to say WWE, WNBA did with the Commissioner's Cup, and seeing the success of that, and as that is continuing to grow and adapt for this year's model. How the NBA took that, and incorporated it early into the season. get some some almost playoff like atmospheres early in the season, and I guess it kind of worked, a 500K prize, obviously, incentivize, I think, especially those guys that are, probably, 10 and below on a roster, 9, 10 below on a roster. Um, and, that, might not be getting salaries at, the top six or, even those, those 7 and 8, above them, in the lineup and in the rotation. So I think seeing how that was successful for the NBA, and to see how that's going to continue to grow and evolve, how the accolades are going to be discussed and spoken upon, is going to be interesting. As we see the history of the game right before our eyes, kind of evolving, kind of developing, and how are we're going to speak upon the first ever, IST, championship. And, kind of think Braun spoke to it in, his in the post game celebration speech, where, people obviously after the game, got up in arms over the Lakers, popping champagne for, winning. I guess, it's a championship. You win, you celebrate. But nonetheless, I guess, I sound like a biased Lakers fan, but anyways, but yeah, being the first to do things, being the first to win an IST championship, even when I speak upon myself of being the first my family to kind of well, I wasn't the first to officially like leave the nest, but I was the first to like leave Greensboro, going to, undergrad, leaving Greensboro in the sense of then going, being the first to, get my master's, from GW. And yeah, so I think, even just understanding those, different moments in your own life, and being, those first that, we tend to forget about that, we accomplished and, taking those first steps to lead, you know, I think I was mentioning, uh, in the sense of, incremental progress and, what that looks like, and how we, build that, build, moment by moment, just from, that very first, step taken, and the first to, do it. And it's interesting, I was, consider myself an early adopter, in the sense of like, even now I'm, utilizing threads, very often, which is, of course, the alternative to Twitter slash X, which I've heard the other day, threads that it crashed. Not exactly certain, haven't been on Twitter in a while, but yeah, Threads has been growing. Really loving the NBA Threads community, and seeing the possibilities of where that can go. They even had an NBA Threads event in the IST tournament, which shows how even in real time, as I mentioned, how these different aspects of our lives are, history, and, we're getting to witness it, kind of every day. So I think, really understanding that, even something as, silly as a, NBA event, threads holding an NBA event, at the IC tournament, but showing, the trust, in the relationship the NBA is building with threads, and in terms of, growing and developing their audience, but obviously helping, threads, legitimize itself and legitimize, what they're trying to build and what they're trying to grow as well. Is, very interested also. And then I kind of also, speaking of the first to do things, let's talk about Shohei Ohtani's contract, the $700 million 10-year deal with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Congrats to him. Congrats to the Dodgers on making that deal happen. If you all aren't aware of the deferments within the contract, where uh, Shohei has decided to forego the initial, it would have been 70 million, to where his 700, the initial full total 700 million uh throughout the duration of the contract to 10 years after the contract ends, and moving forward at the end of the contract, um he chose, to help the team out, and they were able to sign Yoshi. They were able to make the trade for Glasson now. I will say, I'm not very, well versed in the game of baseball, but Shohei's contract was incredible. Him choosing the first 680 million to later on, you know, after the contract and shows the trust he has not only in the Dodgers organization, but uh the focus and the drive, to wanting to win. And we'll eventually see if it was a worthwhile decision for Shoei, as well as for the Dodgers organization moving forward. Just something to continue watching as we're seeing, history unfold. We'll see salary caps increase across all major sports. Record deals continue to happen. But it should be interesting, as we look ahead, into, 24 right around the corner, 2024. Um, and then even just, I guess for myself, for 2024, just wanting to continue to grow in all aspects of, who I am, who I'm becoming, as far as figuring out, the best version of myself, what that consistency looks like, what that self confidence looks like. Um, I had, many discussions with people as far as, what assertiveness looks like, coming from myself, and, how that appears, as I, continue to grow in all aspects. Working on, of course, money management. I feel like, 2024 will be, big year where, you know, so, a lot of money moves will be made, and just, how do I continue to, diversify not only my own personal skill sets, but assets as well, and just continue to grow, as a whole, and, 24 brings, the age of 30, and that'll be exciting as, um, figuring out, that journey, as, continuing on the journey, not even just figuring out the journey, but continuing on the journey, what 30 brings, of course, should be interesting. Um, Hopefully, heading into 24, the Lakers, will look to continue winning, kind of, our early start, hot start to the season, of course, winning the ISC championship, kind of being, in a rough patch. So eventually figuring that out. Loving, what AD's doing thus far. Braun, in his 75th season. Of course, 21st season, but just what Braun's been able to do this past season. Um, Liking, what AR has been able to do as well. Getting into his bag, and then, building off that confidence from last year's, playoff run. and just building on his game. Coming off the FIBA World Cup. It was an early rough start to the season for him. I guess probably fatigue from that World Cup run this past summer. So I think seeing how he closes out the season and the rest of the team, and continue on putting on banner putting up banner 18. I love a lot of people joke that that is T banner, is banner 18, but it is not. We are continuing their journey for banner 18. And then as well as 24, the many blessings and adventure that that looks to bring, personally and professionally in all aspects, of my life. Continuing to, I think I did felt I did a good job as far as building, solid, healthy, friendships and relationships, and doing the work to also maintain those, relationships. And I think I spoke upon it, in episodes before. The people that push you forward and invest in you. And I think it's important to have those people, but also doing the work to keep those people around, because people aren't gonna just choose to stick around. So I think being cognizant of that and building healthy relationships in that regard, and just fostering new adventures, new sights, new sounds. Man, speaking of sounds, I'll get into, I guess, my top four of you know final top four of 2023, as we get into 2024. I guess I'll start off with, sounds what I've been listening to this year. I guess to wrap it up, I've been listening to, For All the Dogs, of late. Yes, by Drake. Yeah, incredible body of work. I was hesitant. Initially, it wasn't, I deemed it not the initial, kind of Drake sound that I probably, was looking for, kind of wanted at the time. But as, I, continued to listen to the album, it grew on me in that sense. So, um, I guess enjoying the album as it grew on me, and then also realizing, kind of the dog, we can be, our inner dogs, our inner animal. And then I think it's funny, in the Chinese horoscope, I am a dog sign. I don't know all that too well, but it's interesting that, in the Chinese horoscope, uh, that they utilize, animals. So interesting that, I'm a dog, and then, enjoying the For All Your Dogs album. And then I also created a playlist, actually kind of close out the year. As far as I try to, okay, so earlier this year, I just tried to do my best to, have a playlist every month that I would listen to. And that'll be the playlist of songs that I listen to, for the entire month. Obviously, do my best to listen to, different sounds that are released throughout the year, and different music, either, be it from my favorite artists or, new and upcoming artists, and enjoying that as well. I think I did a pretty solid job of maintaining that throughout the year. But as far as the final one was, so it's this all Drake, um, album, of course, because For All the Dogs, but it's essentially called Embrace Your Inner Dog Mentality, Establish Your Own Mama Mentality. And it was kind of a playlist that centers around all of, I think, what Drake always kind of speaks on in terms of uh, women, wealth, and wonder, throughout his music. And, kind of, within, my own personal life, what does that look like, um, as we continue to journey on, and maybe, we'll delve deeper into that in 24. but that's what I've been listening to as far as what I've been watching. A lot of basketball based podcasts. I think I've referenced a lot of Gil's uh Gil Arenas and Gil's Arena. Also, his No Chill Gil live streams, as well as what is the podcast he does on Fubu? Fubu Sports. I think it's just the No Chill Gil. Yeah, that one where he has athletes as well. Been loving Unc and Ocho. Nightcap. That's been dope to see. This kind of real raw conversations. Whether it be about the game of football, life, and something that's been dope to watch. As far as TV shows, I've been watching. I just earlier this year I loved. I think I mentioned before Why Women Kill. I don't know if I referenced that before. That was an incredible show that I enjoyed throughout this year. It was something I recently just watched. That I really enjoyed. Oh, Bookie was a good one. I think it was a good take on sports betting and how the impact of you know sports betting and betting companies gaming companies are um impacted the everyday bookie. There was a interesting show on that of sports betting being legalized. So it was a very interesting show in that respect. And then what have I been doing? And what's been currently going on? Of course, in terms of just getting ready for 2024. I'm probably gonna take this time to relax, unwind, just hit the ground running. Of course, with in regards to work and other endeavors that I have come up. And that's something of course I'm excited about. And then what I'm looking forward to, just more knowledge about myself, more confidence within myself, you know really more trips, more blessings, you know and just doing obviously doing the work as well. I think more work, more exciting adventures to look forward to. Is definitely something I'm excited that I'm looking forward to in the next year. And then yeah, just thank you once again. I know this was an impromptu episode. Typically, give you guys one of these once a year, and say, I'm trying to get better at doing more of these episodes, and making this more of a reoccurring thing. Where I have these conversations with you guys, and hopefully, as those blessings continue to come, I can continue carve out more time. In that respect, and then obviously choosing to carve out that time as well. So you know be patient with me. But as I said, thanks again for joining another episode of Honest Conversations with Mo. Have a good one. Peace.